Paul McCartney, the gentle Beatle, the peacemaker of the world's most famous band, once harbored a hatred so deep he called her the reason everything fell apart. Who could possibly inspire that kind of venom from one of music's kindest souls? To understand it, we have to go back to the end of the 1960s when the Beatles were at the height of their fame. Fortune and internal chaos. Paul McCartney was the band's driving perfectionist, the man who couldn't stop creating even as his bandmates were growing apart. John Lennon, meanwhile, had found new inspiration and a new love. Yoko Ono, the avant-garde artist, entered. Lennon's life like a lightning bolt, mysterious, confident and unafraid to challenge the biggest band in the world. But from the moment Yoko started showing up at recording sessions, tensions began to boil. The Beatles had always operated as a unit for Guy's one purpose. Suddenly, there was someone else in the room, whispering in John's ear, questioning decisions, offering opinions on takes. For Paul, who had poured his heart into keeping the band together after manager Brian Epstein's death, Yoko's constant presence felt like an intrusion, almost an invasion. He couldn't understand why John needed her in every creative moment. What had once been for friends making music turned into something fractured, awkward, and painfully personal. Paul tried to stay diplomatic, but privately, frustration burned. During the recording of the White Album, the atmosphere was so tense that engineers recalled near silence between takes. Paul's famously sharp work ethic clashed with Yoko's free-form experimentalism. He saw her as a barrier, not just between him and John, but between the band and its soul. To him, Yoko was dismantling everything the Beatles stood for. When John began prioritizing Yoko's artistic projects over the band, things hit a breaking point. Paul, in interviews years later, admitted that he did resent Yoko, not necessarily for who she was, but for what she represented, the end of the Beatles' brotherhood. He even confessed that her presence made him feel like an outsider in his own band. Behind closed doors, he and Yoko exchanged thin smiles and colder words. She wasn't intimidated, though. Yoko saw Paul as controlling and resistant to change, a man clinging to the past while she and John were trying to redefine art itself. The real hatred, however, wasn't permanent. Time and perspective soften even the deepest wounds. After the Beatles' breakup, Paul's bitterness lingered. But decades later, he publicly praised Yoko's influence on John. She gave him something we couldn't, he admitted. She made him happy. Still, fans can't help but wonder, if not for Yoko, would the Beatles have stayed together longer? Or was their end inevitable, written in the stars long before she entered the picture? What's certain is this: Paul McCartney's hatred wasn't just about a person. It was about loss. The loss of friendship, of unity, of a magical era. And perhaps that's what makes this story so human. Behind the glamour, behind the genius, were four men who couldn't stop the world from pulling them apart. And one woman who became the face of that heartbreak, whether she deserved it or not.